My son Noah tapped his glass with a fork at the yacht club restaurant, and the chatter drifted off like someone had turned down a radio. He stood to speak. The room held 80 people. Noah's startup friends in tapered suits, my old crew from Park and Sons Construction in clean work shirts, a few neighbors who still bring over kimchi on holidays. The bay was a sheet of hammered pewter beyond the windows. It was my 60th. To my father, Noah said, smiling with all his teeth. A man who taught me the value of playing it safe. A couple of his friends laughed the way men laugh when they think they're on the winning team. My foreman Luis looked at the table. My sister pretended to straighten the knives. Noah lifted his glass higher. 60 years and not one real swing, right? No risk, no vision. Just small. He turned the word like a coin. Sloane, his wife, touched his wrist as if to soften it, but her mouth tipped with amusement. She had that influencer poise. Angles found a way to flatter her. I set my napkin on my lap, slow. In the inside pocket of my jacket was a narrow envelope that had lived against my ribs for 3 weeks. Keys and deed to a small marina I'd spent a decade piecing together. Docks, a cinderblock workshop, the permit for 5 live-aboard slips. Appraised at $2.4 million before the market kicked again. The plan had been to hand it to them after dessert, to say, "Here, make something good." I slid my hand over the envelope and left it where it was. "You finished?" I asked. "Dad," he said, as if we were on a panel together. "We could do this in private, but you love a lesson." He lifted his glass once, finally drank, and sat. The clapping was polite as paper. Luis's hand found my shoulder under the table and squeezed. He'd been with me 27 years, seen us pour foundations at dawn, had coffee from the same thermos Ruth used to pack for us in the early days. Ruth's photo sat near the cake, a framed rectangle of a laugh I could still hear if the house was quiet enough. 6 winters since the hospital. 6 winters of a house that remembered her. I stood, thanked everyone for coming, made a joke about the crab cakes, and ended it with, "Let's eat." The room breathed again. Noise returned. No one touched the cake. When the plates cleared and the last hand shook mine, I stepped outside. The night smelled like seaweed and diesel. The wind coming in off the water cut through my sport coat and pressed me awake. I didn't go home. I walked the boardwalk until the wooden planks began to repeat under my feet. Then I drove to the shop. Our sign still lit with one humming fluorescent, Park and Sons in blue, the Sons plural because I believed in the future when I paid the sign maker. Inside, the heat clicked on slow. I made coffee, burned it, tried again. The second pot tasted like something you'd make for a man you didn't love but hoped would forgive you. I carried it to my office. The walls were hung with framed permits and an enlarged photo of the first building we saved from condemnation. 1910 brick, bowed joist straightened, new life stitched into old bones. On the desk, I set the envelope with the Marina deed next to the photo of Ruth wearing my jacket at a Little League game in a spring rain. "Well," I said to the room. The clock over the whiteboard answered on the second. Noah's words landed and then dissolved, like rain on asphalt. Something else stayed. It was not heat. It was the feeling of a bolt finally turned. I opened the laptop. Blue light flattened the room. I typed Noah's company, Canopy and Quay, into the search bar and let the river of results start. Panels, profiles, appraised renovation model that turned houses into sets into equity. I knew some of this. I'd leaned at the edge of his conferences like a dad at the fence of a new skate park. Then I went where the applause doesn't go. County filings, permit logs, contractor complaints. The public portal loaded slow as a shy witness. I read, scrolled, read again. Addresses I recognized floated up. 41 Harbor, 22 Maple, 8 Grafton. I clicked each. Grafton had a final signed off on a Friday at 6:41 p.m., a time when the inspectors I know are home, grilling. The plumber listed was a man who retired 5 years ago. Maple had a variance request that had been approved pending, which is not a phrase, and yet the deck was on Instagram the next morning with Sloane grinning in tennis whites. Harbor had a historic facade permit attached to a roof tear-off order no one had filed. I stopped breathing for a few heartbeats. Then I called someone who walks between words and the real. "Ramon," I said when he picked up. The clatter of a city diner ducked under his voice. "JP. He still calls me that from the years when the crew shortened my name because it sounded like a tool. "You alive? You ever sign off a final at 6:41 on a Friday?" He snorted. I don't sign off past 4 on a Friday. What? I told him the address. He went quiet. Who's the GC? Canopy and Quay. Your kid. Not tonight, I said. Meet me at Records in the morning, he said. Bring coffee. The good kind, not whatever tar you make. At home, I set the Marina keys on the kitchen counter and tried to sleep on the couch. The heater clicked. The house made those night sounds of a place that can stand up by itself. I lay there watching the ceiling like a man waiting for weather. In Records, the next morning, the woman at the desk waved me through with the familiarity bureaucracies afford you after 30 years of your face. Ramon spread files like maps. The room smelled of paper and dust, a smell I trust more than men in tight suits saying disruption and meaning shortcuts. He tapped invoices with his finger. These signatures look like they share a hand, he said. Stamp's legit. Whose stamp? Greer, I said. New stamp. Old trick, Ramon said. You know Greer? No. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Do you want to? I shook my head. Not yet. He flipped to a photo stapled to a permit packet from Maple, framing with Joyce sistered wrong, fastened with the cheap screws that make a sound like a joke when they shear. The caption read, corrected per inspector. The next photo showed the same mistake from the opposite angle, 30 minutes later, and the stamp that says safe in blue. You let this through, I said. We didn't, he said. Someone did. I'm going to ask a blunt question, I said. How much? He looked offended, not at me, but at the air the question had to live in. Not from me, he said. But there are always men who get tired. I took photos of everything, because paper disappears when it feels threatened. Back at the office, I opened a spiral notebook I'd kept since Ruth got sick. Pages of tasks in my tight block letters because the brain's more honest when the hand moves. I titled a fresh page, Consequences. Under it I wrote what I knew. Unpermitted work, fabricated signatures, a lender called Birthing Capital offering bridge loans at rates that make men's eyes water. I called Priya. She runs risk at a regional bank and has a laugh that makes bad news land softer. You're early, she said. You never called before too. I need a picture, I said. Birthing Capital. What's their model? The model where they hand a man a rope and charge him rent for the knot, she said. Confession of judgment clauses. They love builders who smile for cameras and forget math. What? No reason, I said, and she said, don't lie to me, and I didn't. By afternoon, I had a stack, permit irregularities, a list of addresses with work that would fail a half-awake walkthrough, screenshots of Sloan's sponsored posts with comments rising in perfect 30-minute tides like someone was pouring them from a pitcher. I printed it all and laid it out on the drafting table like a puzzle for men who don't want to admit they enjoy puzzles. Step 1. Send a packet to the city attorney's office, public, on the record, with dates, signatures, and a note that said, if a deck collapses, I want this in your hands now, not after. Step 2. Send a second packet to a reporter I trust at the Beacon, who once sat with me in a kitchen that smelled like wet drywall while I explained how a landlord had cut through a load-bearing wall to run a cable. Step 3. Locate 3 homeowners who thought their permits were clean and make sure they have names, numbers, and a sense of how to get out without losing their shirts. Step 4. Talk to a lawyer about the difference between protection and revenge and live in the first word. Noah texted while I was numbering the steps. Heard you sniffing around. Dad, are you serious? A minute later, don't do this. A minute after that, you will regret it. I put the phone face down like you do with a singing toy when you're too tired to find the off switch. At dusk, I drove to 22 Maple. The house looked like a catalog photo. New cedar, black trim, a bench no one would sit on. A woman in a yellow sweater opened the door to my knock. Behind her, a child lay on the floor drawing, a dog asleep beside him. I'm Julian, I said. I used to be a contractor. I looked at your permit online. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about the deck? Her eyes sharpened the way people's do when trouble comes wearing a tie. She let me in anyway. On the deck, I crouched and ran a hand under the rim. No flashing where the ledger met siding. Bolts too few and shallow. The joists had the wrong hangers, the kind you buy when the right kind costs twice as much and you think a camera angle will do the rest. Is it unsafe? She asked. It is if 10 people come over to celebrate something, I said. It is if it rains and the wood swells and you don't know it. She sat. The dog lifted its head. They said everything was signed. They stamped it, I said. There's a difference. She told me they were considering renting the house out for a summer to get ahead of the payment. I told her to speak to a lawyer first, and I wrote down a name. That night, Noah called. "You want to ruin me publicly?" he said. His voice had that thinness men get when they've been loud too long. "You want to do this like a show?" "I want people to not fall," I said. "You taught me this business," he said. "I taught you to check spans and read code," I said. "You built a camera around it. We didn't hurt anybody. You just haven't been in the room when the hurt finished happening." "You could fix this," he said, voice dropping into that old teenage cadence, the one he used when he needed a car or a tie. "You could wire a bridge loan. Or give us that Marina you keep sniffing around. You know you were going to. Just do it." Across the room, the Marina keys glinted on the counter like an accusation and an invitation. "No," I said. There was a long, airless second. "You're a small man," he said. "You've always been small." I let him say it. The line wouldn't be the one that undid me. "Good night, Noah." He came to the shop the next afternoon with Sloane, who wore sunglasses indoors and took them off like she was handing me a mirror. I pressed record on the small device Ruth had bought me for meetings. She'd like to joke I needed a second brain. "You've made calls," Sloane said. "Brands are involved now. My name is a company. Do you understand the liability you're creating?" "You bought compliments," I said, and sold the applause. Noah paced. He used to do that studying for geometry, counting off steps to calm whatever inside him shook. "You hate what we've built because no one claps for a joist," he said. "I'm sorry the world changed." "The world didn't change," I said. "The lighting did." "You give me the Marina," he said, pointing like a man pointing at a map he thinks he owns, "and I make this go away. You don't, and I will make sure you never set foot in a room that matters again." "You already made sure," I said. "Last night." He stared. Sloane's jaw flexed so small you could miss it if you hadn't made a life from noticing where wood meets metal. "Michael," she said, smoothing my name. "You loved Ruth. She believed in lifting people. Where's that man?" "At a table building a scholarship fund," I said. "Where are you?" She blinked first. They left without slamming the door. The recorder's red light was steady as a heartbeat. Attorney Delgado's office smelled like old coffee and hard plastic. The waiting room chairs had a lean like they were discouraged from standing. He'd been in the trenches of contracts long enough to know which paper cuts bleed. He listened. He took the recorder. He replayed Noah's threats and nodded once. "You want to sue?" he asked. "No," I said. "I want to direct a storm, not live in it." "Then we anonymize," he said. "We keep you on the side the light is on." For a week the city did what cities do when someone rattles a file cabinet correctly. It woke. Inspections reopened. A senior at the Beacon wrote a careful story with pictures you couldn't unsee once you'd seen them. Birthing Capital sent a letter to Canopy and Quay with 5 pages of numbers and a paragraph that said, in its polite way, "You are at the edge." Sloane posted a video in a sweatshirt without makeup, the internet's version of sackcloth and ash. 2 sponsors released statements with their legal department's fingerprints all over them. She removed 3 posts. She put up a photo of ocean water next to a quote about authenticity. The comments turned, then thinned, then stopped. Noah called twice. I let it ring. A month after the dinner, I stood on a little stage in the auto shop at Jefferson High where Ruth had taught a night course called Math That Forgives You for Hating Math. The sign behind me read Hana Park Apprenticeship Fund in vinyl letters we'd stuck on that morning. Luis had talked 3 suppliers into donating tools. Ramon had slipped a folded check into my hand on the way in and said, "From the guys who don't get tired." Priya sent 5 seats in a financial literacy class. Delgado drew up papers that made it hard for anyone to turn this into content. I told the room we were paying for apprenticeships that paid men and women to learn clean work, plumb walls, square corners, code-compliant dreams. Stipends for boots and bus passes, and the period between the first day you show up and the first day the check clears. "The boring things," I said, "that become miracles later." A boy in the front row raised a hand and asked, almost suspicious, "Why?" I pointed at the wall of photos they'd put up of the class. Kids with tape measures hooked to belts, shy and proud. "Because you will build the places other people live their lives in." "Because no one claps for a joist," I said, and Luis barked a laugh. "But if it fails, everything on it fails too." After, a woman came up with her daughter. "We bought a canopy in Quay Place," she said, voice pinched by months of stress. We're scared to host anyone on the deck. I'll send someone, I said. If it needs work, we'll find a way. When the room emptied, I sat on the edge of the stage and looked at the banner until the letters blurred. I pictured Ruth leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. That look of hers that could both bless and dare you. Good, I said to the empty space where she used to stand. And then, because old men talk to the air when they're lucky, I said, help me keep it from getting cute. 2 weeks later, Noah and Sloane came to my door in the rain. He wore a suit that had seen better boardrooms. She wore a coat that didn't deserve the weather. They were wet in that way that makes people look honest even when they aren't. We're sorry, Noah said, and in the wet and the dark his voice had none of the angles. We were cruel. I was wrong. You hurt people, I said. Not just me. I can fix it, he said. His face worked like a man at a stuck jar. If you'll help me. Dad. Please. He hadn't called me Dad in a year. The word did what old words do. It carried yesterday into today whether you invited it or not. Sloane's eyes were rimmed red. You don't have to bury us, she said. We can be better. You can't, I said. Whether you will isn't a problem I can solve anymore. Give me the Marina, Noah said, like a reflex, like a cough. Then he heard himself and shut his eyes and shook his head. I'm sorry. I opened the door wider so the rain hit the entry tile the way it used to when Ruth forgot her umbrella and laughed about it. You are not welcome in this house right now, I said. Not loud. But if you want a list of the families who live in your work and a way to start repaying, I'll send it in the morning. You will call each one. Noah started to nod, then didn't. Sloane looked at him, then at me. That's not what he's asking, she said. It's what he's getting, I said. They stood there a moment thin as paper in weather. Then they turned. The taillights washed red over the wet street and were gone. Inside, I dried the tile and made tea because men my age either make tea or pour whiskey, and I wanted a clear head. I took the Marina envelope from the counter and slid the deed back into the folder with the foundation paperwork. Money moves are stories you tell yourself. I wanted mine, for once, to be about a door held open for someone who'd use it. In June, the city posted a bulletin with 3 words I'd read 1,000 times. Stop work order. Only this time it was stapled to Noah's office door. He'd moved to a co-working space by August. Sloane started posting pictures of plants, then books, then quotes from women who'd survived storms she hadn't seen yet. The Beacon ran a follow-up. 2 families had settlements from birthing capital that smelled like desperation and legal advice. 3 decks had been rebuilt. 1 case had slid toward the Attorney General. I kept the shop open mornings and the apprenticeship program full afternoons. Sometimes I taught the module on load paths because I liked drawing arrows on a whiteboard and watching a kid's eyes narrow when the house on paper stands up. The Marina? I didn't sell it. I funded the foundation from accounts meant for men who never retire, and I took the keys to the water whenever my hands needed a different kind of work. On Wednesdays, I sat under the cinder block eave and ate a sandwich while the rigging on the sailboats ticked against masts with the breeze. I rented the slips at a discount to a machinist, a teacher with summers off, a widower who needed a place to talk to a dog that was more patient than most people. One calm evening, I took out a small skiff I keep just for myself. The bay was flat and full of sky. I pushed away from the dock and let the outboard idle us past the last piling, then cut it and drifted. The Marina lights came on in a row, polite and ordinary. The workshop door was open a hand's width, like a man not quite ready to sleep. I thought of Noah in a kitchen somewhere looking at a broken bowl and wondering if glue could ever be more than a pause. I thought of Sloane and her immaculate angles, whether she'd learned to love the mess that makes truth breathable. I thought, mostly, of the apprentices, the boy with the tape measure hooked like a badge, the woman who'd learned to set tile with a patience that made the room quiet down, the way they smiled with their hands when a corner came level. I pulled a folded paper from my pocket, a note Ruth wrote the week before the hospital turned the lights too bright. It was torn from the grocery list and said, in her square teacher's print, "Fund the boring miracle." I put it back in my pocket and let the skiff rock. Behind me, in the dark shop, the clock over the whiteboard ticked. Out on the water, the buoys blinked on and off, steady as a heartbeat. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt like a man who had finally put weight where it belonged and found the floor sound. On the way in, I tied off the skiff, checked each knot with the old tug I can't unlearn, and walked the dock once before locking the gate. The Marina, The workshop, the slips, none of it was a gift any longer. It was a set of tools laid out on a bench, ready for whoever wanted to build something that could hold.